Hey there, I'm Jamie Bennett, part of the ArtPlace team. And for those of you who've already been with us this week, I'd love to welcome you back. For those of you who are just logging in for the first time, welcome. And the good news is you made it just in time, as this is the last day of the last ArtPlace Summit ever. I'd love to take a moment now and invite all of you gathered to join me in some gratitude for the people who have made this week possible. As has been our practice this week, I invite you to start by taking a moment to express your gratitude to the original people of your place. Some of you on this call are those original people. Some of you know the original people, and some of you may not have learned about them yet. If you're in that third category, I invite you to visit native-land.ca as a way to begin learning about the original people of your place. I invite you to sit with me and take a moment to thank the ancestors, the elders, the youth, and the generations still to come. As we begin the end of this week, I want to add some gratitude, and I'd like to especially thank the more than 3,000 people who registered to participate in this week. I'd love to thank the 20 people who have been part of our planning committee, the some 150 speakers, presenters, and facilitators, and especially the Resistance Revival Chorus, who have been our house band for the week. The transcribers and translators, once again, thank you for all of your work. I'd like to add in our colleagues at Playfish Media, who produced all of the video content for the week. Manuel Miranda, who studio produced all of the graphics for this week and for much of what ArtPlace has been doing recently. And especially to our colleagues at Looking Glass Creative, who've provided all of the logistical and technical support for this entire week. So that, of course, brings me back to the ArtPlace staff. Our colleagues Sarah Calderon, Liz Crane, Mara Cuffey, Jamie Hand, Danya Sherman, Eric Takashita, and Lila Tamari have helped make the space for some really important conversations this week, and each of them has also taken the time to make some meaningful connections. And there are three of us who particularly shouldered a lot this week with everything going on. Mari Garcia is the public face for ArtPlace, running social media and making those amazing word tiles at the end of each day. Sarah Westlake has worked on so much of the text and the narrative for this week, and she is the colleague who worked with Liz Crane to bring us the amazing Resistance Revival Chorus. And then, of course, there's Adam Erickson, who is not only the architect of this week, he also happens to be celebrating his birthday today. And anyone who knows me knows at least one thing about me, and that's how important, how central astrology is. So I would just like to take this opportunity to remind Adam that Messenger Mercury made a retrograde U-turn in Scorpio this past October 13th. But for these final 7 days of the retrograde, Mercury slips back one spot on the game board into Libra in your 12th house of healing, compassion, and surrender. Starting Tuesday, Soulful Venus drifts into Libra, and for the first time since 2001, a full moon hovers overhead. This one is in Taurus and your 7th house of relationships, and it syncs up with your indie-spirited, rebellious Uranus, which parks across the zodiac wheel from the Scorpio sun this October 31st, setting off spark. I hope you'll all join me in taking a moment to thank everyone and to also wish Adam the happiest of birthdays. Feel free to drop a word of celebration or thanks into the chat if you're so moved. Okay. So I now want to take a moment to grow this circle even larger. And I want to attempt to thank the people who've made ArtPlace possible. Some of them anyway, most of them, hopefully. So we did that thing where we made a list and we checked it twice. And then I realized that there was no way I'd be able to make it through the reading of that list. So we reached out to our colleague, Sunila Nankani, and asked for her help. So please join me in welcoming Sona and all of us who work at ArtPlace in acknowledging and thanking the people who have been a part of these past 10 years.
Over the last 10 years, our work at ArtPlace has been a marathon, not a sprint. But recently our colleague Maria Rosario Jackson offered a different metaphor. It's not a marathon, it's a relay. We each run our leg, knowing that there have been colleagues behind us and those who will pick it up from us. Team ArtPlace will complete our leg of the race at the end of this year, and we are handing off our batons to all of you. And we have intentionally and appropriately spent most of this week focusing on all of you who will keep running. But right now, let's acknowledge the colleagues who have made this leg possible. Rocco Landesman, son of St. Louis, Missouri, dramaturg, Broadway producer, Roger Miller fan. In 2009, he left his office in the St. James Theater on West 44th Street when President Obama called him to Washington, D.C. to lead the National Endowment for the Arts. Rocco invited Joan Shigakawa to join him as his deputy. She carried with her pioneering research on culturally rooted community planning and development that had been done by Jeremy Nowak when he led the Reinvestment Fund in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Anne Markison and Anne Godwa Nicodemus built on this work in their now famous Creative Placemaking White Paper. Tom Cochran read it and led his organization, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, to invest in partnerships between artists and local governments. This work also inspired Jason Schupbach, Jamie Hand, and Jen Hughes to create and roll out the Our Town grant program at the NEA, and that led to the creation of ArtPlace. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. There were alliances between artists and communities well before this story begins. ArtPlace wouldn't have happened without the example of artists like John O'Neill and his colleagues, who created the Free Southern Theater in Mississippi in the heyday of the Civil Rights Movement. Or Alternate Roots, the community of civic-minded artists that emerged in Atlanta in 1976 and is still going strong. Or Rick Lowe and the community of artists who started Project Row Houses in Houston in 1993. Or the interactions that playwright Marty Pottinger had with tunnel workers underneath New York City in the late 1990s. Organizations like Animating Democracy, the Community Arts Network, leveraging investments in creativity, and Partners for Livable Communities prefigured our work. And so did thinkers like folklorist and oral historian Robert E. Gard and anthropologist Alika Wali. Well before that, artists and their communities came together in alliances like the Settlement House movements and the WPA arts programs. And for thousands of years before that, there was simply no separation between artist and community among the indigenous peoples who lived on these lands. But let's zoom back to the 21st century. It was 2010, and NEA colleagues were busy working within the federal government and across the country to help lift up the work that was happening. But the NEA's resources were limited. That's when Rocco's wife, Debbie Landesman, with a long career in philanthropy, saw a rare opportunity. Private philanthropy could join in on these innovations being led by the public sector. Debbie, Rocco, and Joan teamed up with Darren Walker and Luis Ubiñas at the Ford Foundation to pull together a meeting with the presidents of 8 other major foundations. Ali Jaffin at Bloomberg, Jim Canales, then at Irvine, Alberto Ibarguen at Knight, Rip Rapson at Kresge, Kate Wolford at McKnight, Diane Kaplan at Rasmussen, Judy Roden at Rockefeller, and Don Randall, who was then leading the Mellon Foundation. Don was the first one in, committing Mellon to this effort, and that created momentum for the others at the meeting to join, along with the Robina Foundation and an anonymous donor. They then reached out to Jim Pickman to help create the framework for ArtPlace, a project that was deeply related to their core work, but different from anything any of them would do alone. Clara Miller gave the project a home at the Nonprofit Finance Fund. Then it was time to get to work. The extraordinary urbanist and visionary Carol Coletta was tapped to lead ArtPlace, and she recruited a set of equally gifted colleagues that would eventually include George Abbott, Liz Crane, Tim Halber, Bridget Marquis, and Shreya Parekh. She would forge close relationships with consultants like Joe Courtwright of Impressa and Jennifer Kynan of Original Champions of Design, too. Gary Haddam, then at Deutsche Bank, joined the effort, and thanks to his leadership, Bank of America, Citi, Chase, Morgan Stanley, and MetLife joined the foundations to support ArtPlace's investments. And Carol and Rocco didn't forget about ArtPlace's roots in the federal government. To cement ArtPlace's partnership with federal agencies, they held an extraordinary meeting in the Roosevelt Room of the White House with the Secretaries of Agriculture, Education, Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, and Transportation. The administrator of the EPA and the chair of the Domestic Policy Council were in the room too. Meanwhile, the work continued happening all across the country. ArtPlace's first investments went to organizations in 33 communities. From the Pai Foundation in Honolulu, Hawaii, to the Whirligig Park Project in Wilson, North Carolina. From the Heritage Center in Pine Ridge, South Dakota, to the Louisiana Philharmonic in New Orleans. Over the past decade, ArtPlace has invested more than $100 million to support and grow the field of creative placemaking. ArtPlace has invested in work happening in rural, suburban, tribal, and urban communities. We have made long-term investments in organizations with even longer-term commitments to their own communities. Our research strategies have not just served to make artists' work more legible to those working in community development systems, they have also supported organizations and partnerships' commitment to that intersectional work. We have been able to support the work of artists, local government groups, universities, and we have turned over significant financial resources to the stewardship of assemblies working across the country. Along the way, some of our foundation partners ended their involvement, and we also welcomed even more new ones. The Barr Foundation, the Bush Foundation, the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, the Max M. and Marjorie S. Fisher Foundation, the Stavros Niarchos Foundation, the William Penn Foundation, the Surdna Foundation, and a second anonymous funder. These foundation partners not only provided the capital that ArtPlace put in the hands of practitioners, they also provided our governance. Dennis Scholl from the Knight Foundation worked closely with Carol Coletta in the beginning, stayed involved throughout his tenure at Knight, and has remained a close friend. Luis Ubiñas didn't just convene the first meeting of foundations, he also led the funder partnership in its earliest days. Judilee Reed worked with us during her time at Surdna, and also from her current perch at the William Penn Foundation. And we've probably had no closer partners than the Kresge Foundation, thanks to Alice Carl, Rip Rapson, and Regina Smith. When Carol Coletta and the first staff moved on to their next assignments, Liz Crane was joined by Jeremy Nowak, and then later Sarah Brown and Leanne Norman. They kept ArtPlace's work moving forward and led the foundations through a planning process that set the agenda for ArtPlace's final 7 years. And they shepherded ArtPlace's move from the nonprofit finance fund to Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, our home since 2014. The direct stewards of ArtPlace's work since have included Justin Shodacool, Justin Giles, Vesna Haas, Prentice Onayemi, Ben Strauss, and Javier Torres, as well as the 11 who are currently serving: Jamie Bennett, Sarah Calderon, Liz Crane, Mara Cuffey, Adam Erickson, Marirosa Garcia, Jamie Hand, Danya Sherman, Eric Takashita, Lila Tamari, and Sarah Westlake. These, then, are many of the names on our honor roll. But summarizing 10 years of gratitude in 10 minutes of Zoom is impossible. So we've created a chronicle to record ArtPlace's work in more detail and with the images that you have been watching. Even though some of us are done running, at least for the moment, the race is far from over. And it is all of you who are firmly holding the baton for the next leg and beyond.
Thank you so much to Sona for doing that, and thanks to everyone whose name was mentioned in that video. For anyone who is surprised that their name was not mentioned, I'd like to quote our colleague Stacey Springs and ask that you please know that that omission was an error of the head or the hand, but not one of the heart. As you heard, we put together a chronicle of our decade. It's meant to be a record of what happened and the people who made it happen. The book is free and available for download on the Forecast website. Forecast were publishers. The link is in the chat, and you can head over to forecastpublicart.org, where the book may be read online as an e-publication or downloaded as a PDF. Adam, it also makes a great birthday gift for all of you Scorpios, so if anyone has those in their life. As you heard, when Rocco and Debbie and Joan and Louise, Darren and Carol started ArtPlace, it was really around that notion of a funder collaborative. They wanted a project that was a joint effort of some of the largest arts funding foundations in the United States that would be related to, but distinct from, the work that any one of them would do alone. During my 7 years at ArtPlace, the three funders with whom I've worked most closely, the ones who have provided our governance and oversight, have been Rapson and Regina Smith from the Kresge Foundation, and Judilee Reed, first from her perch at CERTA and now from the William Penn Foundation. As funders, the three of them are used to receiving final reports, but today we flip that and ask them to take the next 15 minutes to file a sort of final report to all of you, the people in whose work they've been investing. We ask them to reflect back on the past decade, update you on where the work stands for them at the moment, and then project forward a bit and let you all know what they are thinking the next year or 2 or 3 of work will be. So with that, please join me in welcoming Rip, Regina, and Judilee. Rip, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you, Jamie. That overview was so virtuosic in sort of its breadth and nuance. I'm not sure I'm going to spend much time going through the history, but I wanted to say just a word, having sat in Rocco's office with Joan and Rocco very early on and talking about how to frame this up and then participating in those early meetings. What struck me was how true Rocco's vision was, and yet how much it shape-shifted over time. And you've heard about the sort of the basic elements, the idea that you could get philanthropic resources pooled in a way that would permit each of us to fund more broadly than we might if left to our own devices, that there would be a public sector, civic sector cooperative structure that would encourage the federal government in particular to think about forging different kinds of relationships with community cultural workers. And then there was sort of a narrative quality. One of the first decisions we made was to commission Anne Markison and her colleagues to develop some sense of where the creative placemaking field had been and where it was and where it might go. So those 3 pillars sort of remained constant throughout, the idea of moving capital to ground, the idea of working across boundaries, and the idea of clarifying narrative. But it really took Jamie and his absolutely spectacular, miraculous, wonderful team to take that architecture and animate it. Carol and her colleagues got a good running start on it, but Jamie slowly and gently sort of shaped this in a slightly different direction. And I would argue that what he did was in many ways why we find ourselves where we do today, which is he sort of slowly, gently removed all of this from philanthropy. It became less and less about a bunch of foundations pooling big sums of money, and more about how capital could actually advance the work of the field. And so if you were to go back to Rocco's 3 pillars, think about what Jamie and his team have done. They've completely redefined what it means to sort of move capital into community. Their regional assemblies, their grant making, they're spread across rural and urban America. They're spread into every state of the union, redefined what it meant to think about having philanthropic partners on the ground with culture workers. The narrative work went so far beyond Anne Markison's work as almost to defy belief. The kind of commissioning of research they've done, the work they've done across sectors, their grids and their matrices and their ways of describing how creative placemaking and culture intersect with every dimension of contemporary society is just phenomenal work. And the network sort of speaks for itself. The idea that we would have 3,000 people sign up for today for this week's session and have essentially maintained that level of energy and commitment over the course of the last 7 years is truly remarkable. But perhaps most important is that in this sort of third turn of the wheel, where Jamie and his team are stepping aside, what they have done is essentially pass the baton in exactly the way that Maria Rosario Jackson described. They, I think, have sort of set up three broad principles that philanthropy, I think, is going to internalize, and Regina and Judilee can talk about with some specificity. The first, again, sort of sticking with this sort of three-part structure, is that they've ensured that capital and support moving into community is going to be a distributive proposition. It's not going to be done from a centralized architecture. It's not going to be done predominantly top-down, but it's going to increasingly reflect the kind of energies of community that need to be supportive. Second, I think they've clearly helped move with the field into the realm of the energies of racial justice. I think when we began, that was not front and center, frankly. I think we were interested in creative placemaking as a community building tool, to be sure, but it wasn't done through the lens of racial justice. And I think Jamie and his team have very appropriately both responded to and helped accelerate those energies in the realm of arts and culture. And third and finally, they've taken sort of Rocco's grand vision of integrating federal agencies and art and culture down to where it counts, which is in the day-to-day routines and movements of community. They've worked with cities, they've worked with counties, they've worked with justice organizations, they've worked with states. They've really developed a very different sense of what it means to engage arts and culture meaningfully in setting the table of decision-making, participating in the table of decision-making, and then carrying out in ways that are proportional and equitable the results of that decision-making. It is really an extraordinary thing that they have done. And so this third turn of the wheel is really the handoff that we imagined 10 years ago, but seemed hard to imagine how to do properly, respectfully, and genuinely. And for my money, that is exactly what Jamie and his team have done. I think they have been exemplary in their integrity and their creativity and their vision. And it's been our huge privilege at Kresge to partner with them. So with that, maybe I could hand it to Regina, who runs the Kresge Arts and Culture program and who is really the person in our team who makes all of this go. Regina.
Thank you, Rip. I would personally like to thank the ArtPlace team, and particularly for really a decade of, as Rip stated, a decade of exceptional work and really being thoughtful stewards of partners. As a final report, many of our grantees are participating know that I prefer kind of shorter reports, so I'll try to give you a shorter report. But you know, the headline for me is really that multiple fields and funders valued and really benefited from this decade of work. And yes, the initiatives and the money matter. But I think particularly it was around understanding why this work matters, kind of this hybrid work, which sometimes is really difficult to explain. It's difficult to kind of talk about, and you know it when you see it. That's really somewhat challenging, not just as a practitioner, but as a funder. But really more importantly, how it manifests in different places and local contexts. Challenging us all to reimagine the way that arts and culture kind of manifest in communities, different types of communities and places. Rip mentioned experimentation, really challenging and encouraging us to experiment with supporting activities outside of our geographies, if we're bound as a funder to fund in specific geographies, but also fund beyond our strategic priorities. That's difficult to do, particularly you know, when it started back in 2010, 11, and 12. And then when you look at the work that ArtPlace and Kresge invested in with Bridgespan last year to help us understand, you know, kind of where are we? Where are we as a field? Along the 5 dimensions, I think what Bridgespan noted was that a lot of good work has been done, but more work still needs to be done. And particularly when you apply a social justice and racial justice lens, we have a lot of work to do. We've heard from next generation leaders, organizations, and specifically practitioners of color that, you know, this is beyond the moment. We're overdue. In Rip's perspective in his notes, said to kind of turn the wheel. I love that. We have a lot of metaphors. They're relays and they're we're turning the wheel. But nonetheless, you know, ArtPlace, its funders are not the field. You all are. And this is a really unique opportunity for us to kind of mark this moment, to celebrate the extraordinary work, but also look forward. So I'm going to pass it to Judilee.
Thanks, Regina. This is so much fun. That video was incredible, and it's hard to not get emotional to see, you know, the the snippets of over a decade's worth of work and relationships and really beautiful accomplishment play out over screen. So I'm going to take a slightly different tack to how I offer my final report on ArtPlace. Because, you know, my relationship to ArtPlace it's really taken different forms over the years. And so let me just comment a little bit on that, and let's see where we end up. So while it was in its earliest days of development, I was running a time-bound initiative called Leveraging Investments in Creativity, an arts organization that was national in scope, that we worked in a range of cities and communities and contexts to understand the conditions of working artists and the infrastructure that supports their creative practice. And I mentioned this because during those years of Link, which is about 2003, 2013, Holly Sidford could fact check all of this as the founder of this incredible project. But during that time, a groundswell of work was building to describe the various ways that artists are part of a workforce, how they pursue community development goals, and their definition as a population that contributes to society, not as isolated eccentrics, but as the extraordinary talent that uses metaphor and problem solving and massive amounts of creativity to pursue ideas and goals. And so ArtPlace and creative placemaking took that early work and really ran it through a structure that gave rise to a field of practice roughly described as the intersection of arts and community development. And at the time, you know, my appreciation or concern maybe about ArtPlace was really informed by this early work. And I'll share that from my perspective, joining philanthropy, my relationship with ArtPlace was both from a national perspective while working for the Surdna Foundation, and then from a local perspective, which is now as I work for the William Penn Foundation. And from the national perspective, ArtPlace was a funding collaborative that provided really a turbo boost of dollars to artists and communities that our foundation couldn't have supported at the same scale on its own. And even more important, it was a learning network that helped demonstrate creative placemaking in locales that, again, the foundation probably couldn't have reached on its own. And from a local perspective now, ArtPlace, you know, it has provided technical assistance. It has assembled a dynamic practitioner network, and it has provided an important validation from a table of national funders for the work that takes place locally in Philly. And I have to say that, you know, through these years, my perennial question to Jamie Bennett has been one of loving skepticism. And I would frequently ask, you know, what are we doing after we get through this brochure description of what is important? And Jamie, being the very astute leader that we all know him to be, he asked Liz and Sarah and Lila and Maura and Adam and Eric and Danya and Sarah Calderon and Jamie Hand and the other team members, past and present, to really answer that question. And the staff, the incredible staff, has done so by connecting us to work that has reminded us, as Rip referenced, has reminded us that philanthropy is not the savior of people in neighborhoods, as Janera Solomon called out on day one. They demonstrated that we belong to ArtPlace as partners, true partners. And they worked hard, really hard, to wrestle us into that position, and we acquiesced. And as I look at the field of creative placemaking in this current context, it really will be the wisdom of ArtPlace and allied networks and efforts like those of the Intercultural Leadership Institute, Center for Cultural Innovation, even SOCAP, which is pursuing, the new socially minded capital markets. These are all great examples that join the hundreds of practitioners who have defined and continue to redefine the field of creative placemaking. And they will guide us to the critical questions about this collective work that we do and how we do it. And, I have to say, from the Philadelphia perspective, where, it's a really difficult time right now, as we all know, in many of our communities. And I can't think of a more important time for a city to continue to pursue this work. Public safety, economic and workforce development, justice reform, and education, these are just some of the sectors that need this kind of intersectional thinking, that need real goals for racial equity and healing. And I just can't imagine having to address, or even attempting to address, these profound questions without artists and culture bearers to guide us. And so for that, a huge debt of gratitude to ArtPlace.
Gosh, thank you, all three of you, so much for those final reports. And as soon as your audited financials are available, you can feel free to amend your report to all of us. I think that notion of loving skepticism is such a perfect description of the ways that we've worked together in mutuality and how much we've all learned for you. So thank you, all three of you, so much for that. And now, as we prepare to move into the final third of our plenary time together, we wanted to end in the spirit of that opening metaphor, the relay. And we wanted to end with important voices, ones that are deeply linked to the work of artists working as allies in equitable community development, but who've actually done so outside the formal partnership that has been ArtPlace, colleagues who will keep running long after ArtPlace is just a memory. So we reached out to three colleagues, Cate Fox, Mallory Nezam, and Gabrielle Uballez, all of whom generously agreed to dip into as much of this week as their bandwidth, both literal and figurative, would allow. And they're going to share some closing reflections. All of them have impressive bios, which you can find on artplacesummit.org. But we've actually invited them here as people, each of whom has been given the extraordinary gift of noticing. And it was actually Cate who's going to lead us off, who inspired this closing moment. A few years ago, she shared with me the fact that she marked some of her weeks by attending a silent Quaker meeting. And she shared that at a silent meeting, one sits and listens and begins paying attention to the insights that come. The job of the participant is then to sift through these insights, these messages, and decide which of them are meant just for you and which are meant to be shared. And I have to admit that since Cate shared that, I've realized how many times I've been in meetings, not Quaker meetings, but just sort of business meetings, and how many times I've taken up space and time by sharing messages that were actually meant just for me, ones that didn't need to be spoken with everyone who was gathered. I hope that since then, I've gotten better at my own filtering, my own listening. In any case, Cate, Mallory, and Gabrielle have spent their week listening, noticing, and sifting. And we've asked each of them to share what they've been left with all of you. So with that, let me turn the Zoom over to Cate. Cate, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jamie, and hello, everyone. I'm speaking to you from the unceded lands of the Potawatomi, a land loved by the Odawa, Ojibwe, and many other tribal nations, a place now called Chicago. We spend so much time receiving information that we rarely have the space to really soak it in. Our listening can take on an almost predatory quality. Not should I respond, but how will I respond? Messages have risen all week about the need to unlearn these harmful practices and ways of being. In the first plenary, we were encouraged to decolonize our minds. But it is hard to do that when we don't allow ourselves to stop. In fact, when we are programmed not to stop. We are going to practice stopping just for a short moment today. But I want to remind you that this is available to you at any time. If this idea feels scary or the time itself makes you feel uncomfortable, that's good. Then this is especially for you. As our friends at the NAP Ministry remind us, rest is also resistance. Who are we for? Roberto Bedoya asked us. In this question, I hear, who am I accountable to? Not on the org chart, but spiritually, emotionally, financially. Whose voices and values are being centered in my action? And more broadly, the way I live my life, the way I show up in the world, the way I raise my children, and the way I interact with my neighbors. For me, this conference has been an invitation to see accountability as a radical loving practice. It feels strange to even say the words accountability and loving together. And yet, wasn't that what yesterday's plenary session was all about? I don't know how to build trust and common purpose from perfection. For me, the shape of trust incorporates my mistakes, and perhaps most importantly, what I do to heal those I hurt with my mistakes. It requires me to want and to do better, knowing that it means I will from time to time fall short again. Grace making and the placemaking. That idea sticks with me as both a challenge and a promise. Now, not everyone receives accountability from a place of love, and not everyone delivers it from a place of love either. But this is what is offered to us, a muscle worth building, because and I hope we, see the gift it offers us, a way to more fully know ourselves, a way to more fully know each other, a way to more fully love each other, that deep sense of place knowing and a pathway to true transformation. And here we are, virtually gathered, zooming in from our offices maybe, or more likely from our personal living spaces. A reminder that this summit and ArtPlace itself is never the building where we meet, nor the organization for which we work. Those are vessels, important because they collect us. But what connects us? What connects us is the action of unleashing the beauty that already exists in places. What connects us is knowing that real people have real power. What connects us is a commitment to dismantling the systems and structures that were built on the backs of our Native, Black, and Brown sisters and brothers. That liberation, as we were reminded, is a practice. That makes us more durable than a single organization or even a moment. When we support each other, when we practice and accept loving accountability, we strengthen our connections, we nourish our places, and we live out our commitment to be a good relative. Thank you for the gifts of your insight throughout this whole week, your vulnerability, your humor, and your commitment to this way of being. We know that there is more to come. And with that, I will hand it off to Mallory.
Thank you for handing the baton in the relay race to me, Cate. I am holding Walter Wallace Jr. and his family in my heart today because Black Lives Matter. Now, it's 1992. I'm 7, living on the small Caribbean island of Dominica, where we speak patois and climb trees to pluck mangoes. It's a crystal clear sunny day, and I'm practicing one-handed cartwheels in the yard. And then suddenly, it rolls in quickly. The dark gray, almost black, pregnant with gift. The thick, single cloud settles just next door, just above the neighbor's house, literally above their roof. It's not a storm, it's a single, plump rain cloud. And where I sat on the lot next door, we were completely dry. It felt like night and day, storm and sun, yes and no. And I remember this like it was yesterday. How can it be that it is raining at my neighbor's house and a perfectly sunny day at mine? I watched in awe. How could two opposite things both exist in the same moment? How could two truths be real? It is raining. It is a perfectly sunny day. Both and. How could edges be so close? This week, I've listened to how so much of our work is holding multiple truths and living multiple truths, being multiple truths. It is raining, it is sunny, it is all true, depending on where you're practicing your cartwheels. It isn't easy to hold multiple truths, but what allows us to do that? And right now, in this moment where all the different parts of our lives are falling together, we know that we can't not be anything but these multiple truths. How do we create that world? How do we hold things bigger than us that we don't understand or even don't know yet? Art has always been about transcendence for me. Art and artists teach us about the infinite, about a way when it seems like there is no way, how to be curious, even when afraid, to love that which we don't know, that which scares us. And from love comes creation, quite literally. Cornel West says justice is what love looks like in public. I ask, what about joy? Is joy what justice looks like in community? I think probably all of us have not just made peers and colleagues through this work, but friends, maybe even what feels like family. I know it's felt like that for me this week. And to kind of build on what Cate said, family holds each other accountable, and we have tough conversations. We push each other, we disagree. As family, we must hold each other, and we must hold each other accountable. We must hold our field accountable. How is creative placemaking, keeping, knowing at the service of something bigger than itself? What is our North Star? And as I think about this moment of sunsetting, I think, how is this the precipice? I think about the water cycle, how it doesn't stop after rain, evaporation, and then the whole thing moves again. Both and a cycle. This field is fire and it is tender. We work for justice and joy. And as the incredible poet June Jordan once wrote, and this has been kind of on my mind this week, she said, "There is no chance we will fall apart. There is no chance. There are no parts." And now I'd like to hand the baton off to my new friend, Gabrielle Uballez, as I announce my creative placemaking retirement in lieu of my budding career as an emerging ukulele artist.
Thank you, Mallory. Hello, Gabrielle Uballez. We'll see whether or not you all win the toddler lottery today with one of my kids bounding into the room. I'm a mama, I'm an artist, and I'm a person who lives on unceded Tiwa territory in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Creative placemaking has been a part of my life since I think it was even a term or before I knew it was a thing. I've had the privilege of being a part of a youth arts organization and eventually leading that organization as its executive director. Art, placemaking, culture are so near and dear to my heart. I've been inspired, affirmed, and challenged by the brilliant folks who have presented and facilitated space this week. I'm leaving this week saying, yes, I agree, sign me up, call me in, I'm here for it. Let's bring art and culture into all the sectors, all the spaces, and all the places, because we, the meaning makers, the artists, the culture bearers, are essential to shaping our world beyond museum walls and concert halls. From healthcare to housing to restorative justice to climate justice to making democracy real. We have something essential to contribute. I so supremely believe in us, so I want to offer some thoughts and questions to help stretch and grow. I've often been simultaneously inspired and frustrated by the idea that we would use art as a way to solve problems, or to have to clearly explain and measure why our work as artists and culture bearers matters. Yes, art can be a tool, but this is not its most radical purpose. Culture can be a tool, but this is not what makes it sacred. So I've been thinking, what is art's divine purpose? What makes culture sacred? What makes art and culture possible? For me, a family, neighborhood, or community's ability to make art and practice culture. Let me say that again. For me, a family, neighborhood, or community's ability to make art and practice culture is the greatest measure of our human dignity. It is the greatest measure of our human dignity. I think that's why, as I follow my passion, curiosity, and gifts, I find myself further from the arts as a sector and closer to places that are working to do things like achieve economic justice and to close the racial wealth gap as a part of my professional identity. I want to offer some questions I've been asking myself, ones that challenge me. The first is, how do I practice equity in the systems we have while working towards the real goal of collective liberation? Here's how this question's sitting with me right now. Diversity, equity, inclusion bring institutionally marginalized folks into the room, but these ideals still center the authority and standards of mainstream colonial white patriarchal institutions. Focusing on collective liberation for me matters because it invites me to center trust, dignity, and power for the people closest to the pain, closest to the work, and closest for the changes I think we need to make. Another question I've been asking myself is, what if I truly believed and lived into the idea that artists and culture bearers have already demonstrated accountability by virtue of their existence and offerings to our communities, and by being in intimate relationship with people and communities with whom they already share accountability practice? As a person with access to resource and power, what if I ask myself, how am I accountable to those who are creating culture rather than asking them to be accountable to me? I've been so grateful to work with my dear friend Tanya Esparza and an anonymous donor, as well as some mutual aid from our community to steward thousands of no strings attached dollars into the hands of Black, Indigenous, and people of color culture bearers in New Mexico. That's where that question comes from. And we're inviting others to ask it with us. I think the reason that the work I'm doing right now lives more in a sector of philanthropy, wealth redistribution, and economic justice is because I so profoundly believe that culture is a human right. And I'm trying to do my part to get to the root of what I see as the issue. I want people to have what they need: food, housing, safety, health, freedom, dignity, interdependence, so that arts and culture occur authentically and naturally and live and breathe outside of arts and culture institutions. That we have what we need so we create freely and without the burden to measure or justify. I'm making a commitment to center trust, dignity, and power, and to practice new forms of accountability in all that I do, so that we can grow the cempasúchil for our home altars and have the reams of colorful ribbon that adorn our feast day ribbon skirts, and can provide the sticky rice for the zhongs that our immigrant grandmothers and aunties can pass, food traditions to our babies. I want these things for you too. Thank you for all being fellow question askers and power builders in this work. Thank you, ArtPlace America, for giving us the space to ask these questions, to talk to each other, and to do the work. Jamie, I'll hand it to you.
Gabrielle, thank you so much for that. I'm a little disappointed that we didn't win the toddler lottery, but there's still time. And I just have to say that there are some days when those big questions, what is loving accountability? What is art's divine purpose? Feel more impossible than doing a one-armed cartwheel. But today, in this moment, maybe just for this moment, everything feels possible. And Gabrielle, Cate, Mallory, Rip, Regina, Judilee, thank you so much for helping us frame up this hour together.